Good evening, everyone. My name is Roger Maloney, and welcome to the African American Women in Cinema Education Series. I'm your host, and this series is presented by Ufront Media, and Ufront Media is a company that highlights content creators and entrepreneurs on the rise. And you can also visit us at www.ufrontmedia.com. But today, our talk is going to be talking about Directing 101, and we have an amazing special guest. This gentleman's name is Terence Gordon. Terence is the CEO and owner of TNG Films and a co-owner of Black Ink Pictures. His uncanny eye with veracity and flair has led him to successfully direct numerous cross-genre projects, including music videos, branded commercials, feature-length films, new media series, and documentaries. His passion for photography has paralleled his filmmaking skill set. His most recent work includes directing a documentary feature film called What's in a Name, a Versace story, and executive producing on the documentary, the legendary Marlon Williams. Terence, he's also the creator of Youth Ambition brand and digital cinema series, and an inventor of automotive traction device called the Traction Master. I gotta ask him about that. When he's not editing or producing, he spends his time as an officer aviator with the United States Air Force Air Patrol. That's why I gave him the nickname Top Gun, and he was laughing at me. But you gotta see the presentation photos. It's awesome. It's amazing. And a member of Rotary International and a delegate with the National Police Defense Foundation. Terence, how you doing, man?
I am doing great, Roger. I'm doing great. Thank you for that wonderful intro.
Yeah, man. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today. And one of my first questions I have for you is, where did you get the bug or the passion to start directing? Where did that come from?
Well, a long story. I would say that I believe, I should say, that back when I was a kid, one of the first movies that I saw was Kramer versus Kramer. Or I should say, one of the first movies I saw that had an emotional impact on me was Kramer versus Kramer. As in, I remember as being a kid watching this film and feeling some level of emotion, some level of connection. And, you know, you're a kid, you don't know what you're feeling, but you just know that you're moved by something. I remember, you know, I was born in England, and then my parents had moved back from England to their country, which is South America, Guyana. And while we were there, they have double feature drive-in cinemas because the country is half Indian, half Black. And so they would show one Indian film and one English film. And I remember going to the drive-in cinema and seeing a movie called The Burning Train. It was an Indian movie, so it was kind of subtitled, but it had this soundtrack in there. And although you couldn't really understand what was being said, I understood the movie fully. You know, even though I could barely see over my dad's chair out the front window because it was a drive-in cinema. And, you know, I just remember being moved by movies like that. And another old one, which no one's probably also ever heard of, is Cornbread, Earl and Me with Lawrence Fishburne.
That's a classic film.
Oh, you know that one? You're the first person that knows that one. Because, again, I was a kid, and I remember, you know, this one scene with him, with this guy. I don't think it was Fishburne. I think it was someone else within the film, running across this basketball court and getting shot by the police because of a mistaken identity. And this thing, you know, he had a soda pop in his hand, and it fell to the ground, and it bust in slow motion. And again, as a kid, you're not really sure what you're seeing, but you know that you're moved by what it is you're seeing. So I think from then on, the bug for being in film had been planted for myself. And it wasn't until years later, coming to the United States as a teenager, studying, you know, I went into computer engineering and, you know, worked at Morgan Stanley and showed a work time and different places like that. And the entire time I'm just like, man, I want to be a filmmaker or an aviator. And, the aviator thing started from as a kid as well, because my dad was in the military and he always took me to every christening for every airplane that they purchased. And, when he flew to bases, he would take me with him. And so I got very entrenched in aviation. But it was more about the narrative behind everything in life that I think I sort of related to. And, even being part of aviation somewhat felt like it was a story to me. I always felt like I was always outside, removed from everything, and I'm looking at a story taking place. And when I came to the United States and, went to school and, got into corporate America, because my mom said you need to get a job that's going to pay. And so you're going to study computer engineering or computer science at the time. And that's what I did. But even while I was in corporate America, I said, I felt unfulfilled. And when I could afford it, I went back to school and studied film directing at NYU. And my bosses will allow me to get out from work, book as though I was in a meeting, take the train from Midtown Manhattan, go to downtown to NYU, take my classes, get back on the train, come and finish my work. And I did that for 2 years in the directing program until I finished. And I remember one time, because I was an integration engineer, and Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, Steve Ballmer was the president of Microsoft at the time, and Bill Gates was there. And Bill Gates was over at 1585, which is the main headquarters building. Steve Ballmer came over to 750, and they both were presenting. And they were presenting the Pocket PC, I don't know if you remember that back then. And so we had to deliver this presentation to the 4th floor auditorium.
Oh, wow.
And I convinced my bosses to give me some money, because when I was at NYU, I met a lot of different filmmakers that were in my classes. One of them was this guy, Brian Kushner, who owned Purple Cow Post. And he used to edit all the music videos for like P. Diddy and Christina Aguilera and Britney Spears and all these people. And he was in my commercial directing class. And so I convinced my company to give me money to have Brian edit this thing that I shot. And what I did is I went through 750 at Morgan Stanley, which was about 30 something floors. And I got the security guards and I said, let's do this Mission Impossible thing where we're trying to deliver the CD to the 4th floor auditorium to Steve Ballmer. And we're running into all these obstacles with the guards trying to stop us in the elevator and all this. And I created this elaborate short video, and Morgan Stanley paid for the edit. And I took it to my friend Brian Kushner, who overcharged me, I'm sure, to get it cut. And we made this thing. So on the day that Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates them came to do their thing, we were able to deliver and play this in the 4th floor auditorium in real time. So they're watching this video of this CD being delivered to the 4th floor auditorium. And then in comes, when it all goes through all the security and running through the elevators, being chased by security and all this stuff. And then it comes into the 4th floor auditorium. Boom, there it was. We came through the door with the actual CD. And this is the date how far back things were, right? It was like 2000. I think it was 2000 actually, exactly, because I was still at school and I finished in 2001. So it had to be like around 2000. So we delivered this CD doing this elaborate thing. And my bosses said, you don't belong here. They're like, you should just go make films. And I was hanging around a lot of colleagues that at the time that were at Morgan Stanley as well, that were filmmakers. And some of those guys were in the multimedia department. And one of them used to direct Resurrection Boulevard, which used to be on Showtime, that boxing with the Spanish guys. And he would literally get on the plane, fly to LA, direct it, and then come back the next day. And he did that a couple of times until he got caught, and then they fired him because he was sometimes missing days and what's not. But so I think the whole thing is when you got bit by the bug of filmmaking, that you just can't get it out of your system,
Wow.
And so I had to pursue it, and I remember walking out and I was telling my wife at the time, I said, I'm gonna go do this. And I walked out in 2002, right when my son was born, and I never looked back.
Oh,
I
wow.
formed a production company, TNG Films at the time, and I started on that journey. And the first movie I made was Avatar: Life After Addiction, which was based on a friend of mine's life, who was a model in England and in Paris, and came to the United States after somewhat of a failed modeling career.
Wow.
And it was based on his life, where he, became this courier for drugs to all these high price fashion models. And I remember taking a camera and 26 actors and just me, crew of one, to make this film. And it took me, it wasn't that very long, probably made it in 15 days or something. Not the best film at all, but I was experimenting. And I just kind of wanted to go out on a limb and do this. I mean, not even a sound person, okay? I mean, I did everything myself. And then I edited the film for an entire year and then lost it because my machine crashed. But I had the raw footage, so I had to re-edit the stuff, and I did. And this was around the time that online stuff was coming up, and I put it in a festival. I think it was in Australia or someplace like that, or I don't remember which country it was, but it was a foreign country. I remember submitting it online, and it got pirated by the Chinese. And I remember getting a link to buy my own film, my own short film, for $1. And I looked and it had 100,000 downloads at $1. And I'm thinking, I got not even a penny of that. So that was my foray into film. It's like the world of
Well, you got
piracy.
downloaded and pirated. That's a film all in itself.
It was. That's and I'm sure other filmmakers have probably experienced the same thing, that doing this stuff. But I kind of, for me, I learned so much from making that one film. It was about a 45-minute short, and I was just happy to be experimenting with it. And I said, I can do this. This is something I'm going to enjoy doing. Being able to tell stories and make films. So that's kind of how it started. That's a little bit of a long story, but yes, that's how I kind of started.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a film I want to see right now. My next question I want to ask you is, we were talking about, who are some of your favorite directors that you like?
Man, I got so many of them.
Just give me a quick give me 2 or 3 that you like.
I would say Tony Scott. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. Tony and Ridley Scott, I'll group them as one because they're brothers, but they have not completely different styles. But Tony Scott, who directed Top Gun, which used to be one of my favorite movies. Mm-hmm. No surprise there, Aviator. But but I love his work because it has such rich colors in it, and he uses a lot of contrast in his films, and he used a lot of stylized editing, sometimes a little too much, but nevertheless, he really put a sort of craft into his medium, and so it sort of has this visual art feel at the same time. So I certainly loved his stuff. Adrian Lyne, who's this British director that only directed about 7 movies, 8 movies. He did Lolita, he did The Unfaithful, he did Jacob's Ladder. I can't remember the other ones that he did.
Unfaithful was a good film. Jacob's Ladder was a good film too.
Yeah, so he directed those. I liked his storytelling efforts, his work. I wish he directed more. Another one is actually a mentor of mine, Joseph Rubin, who directed The Forgotten, The Money Train, The Good Son, Sleeping with the Enemy, those type of movies. his style of film work is pretty good, just from a narrative standpoint. And I've had the opportunity to talk to him about just technique and so forth. So that I found that to learn a lot from that. Other people, I would say, I know you had mentioned Quentin Tarantino at some point when we were talking.
Yeah, we're talking about Tarantino.
Yeah, he's different, but not one of my favorites.
What about Stanley Kubrick? Stanley
Kubrick, pretty good. I like Spike Lee as well, because I feel Spike Lee, F. Gary Gray, those guys, I like their work. Even Ernest Dickinson, hasn't really directed a ton of films, but maybe I just like the films that they have done. So there's some of that. This other gentleman that did Red Tails, Anthony.
Oh yeah.
Gosh, can't remember his last name right now.
That opening shot in Red Tails was amazing with the war scene with the airline fighters. Amazing.
Oh yeah. And Ron Howard. I like Ron Howard's work. See, there's so many of them, and all for different reasons, of course. Some of them is just the way they pace. Some of them, have a little bit more of a laid back way of filmmaking, but their stories resonate strongly. And again, some of it could just be choice of material that they are doing. So, but yeah, those are some of my favorites. I can probably go on with another 10. So.
But that's great stuff, man. So let's get into your amazing presentation. I'm looking at it and I'm like, I saw a couple of slides, and you're gonna talk about directing 101. So everybody take notes and let's tune in to Terence's presentation on directing 101, filmmaking from behind the scenes, and as he shares his thoughts with us.
Okay, so I'm not sure. I think this is like a 40-minute session that you guys have. So, and I'm just pulling this from one of a piece that I put together, a presentation for another entity. And I figured, well, why not just go through some of those slides? But the main role of a director in general would be to be the author of the film, right? He or she's vision is what is typically seen on screen, or at least that's the attempt, is that person will be the author of that medium. They're there to tell a story. They are there to present a vision. And, as M. Night Shyamalan always says, that's kind of all we really have is our perspective on something. So 3 or 4 people can direct something, and we'll have probably a different outcome, just depend on what their vision is for it. Like I said, this is some coursework from some other things, but still, I look at directing as kind of like a complete skill set, in the sense that you're interacting with all phases of the film. So from the big idea to the script, to roles and responsibilities, pre-production, of course, which is one of the most important aspects of filmmaking if you want to have a successful production itself, and then finally within the post-production, which also. Now, all 3 elements within that space are equally important, and they all come with their own challenges. These are just a few of the different films, and as directing, it's not necessarily that you're just a feature film director. You can be directing. Like I have Prime of Your Life here. That's not a film I directed. I executive produced it for Michelle. I did direct. Youthful Ambition series, I've been directing, and that's an ongoing series set. The documentary film, What's in the Name of Versace, which we just finished. And I'm missing the Marion Williams documentary here, which I produced. I did not direct on. But, filmmaking, again, you have the different angles in terms of whether it is feature film, documentaries, or a different medium type. Now I put here photography, and the reason why I put photography is because for myself, photography informs filmmaking personally. And things are, some people it's oil painting, some people it's, just reading short stories in magazines, and others might just be observing life. For myself, I love to take photos. Like for instance, this image that you're looking here with these tiles, this was on Veterans Day, and I'm ex-military. Used to be in the U.S. Army for 8 years as a reservist, and then now with the Air Force, Civil Air Patrol as a volunteer, co-pilot flying air search and rescue. So I take a lot of aviation pictures, but again, I take each photograph in a way that hopefully it feels like it's telling a story, or that is capturing some sort of tone or mood to it. It has an aesthetic to it. So whether it's the colors, whether it's the angles, whether it's how it's staged, how it's positioned, whether it's a fragmented shot, such as, the hands folded, or the boots, you can see just the soldiers, or these guys are Navy guys, because I shot this on the Intrepid in New York City. And so photography is a huge tool for me personally as a filmmaker. Talking about types of media, new media, that sort of came into play. This is from my youthful ambition, and one of the things that within my youthful ambition blend is we have this thing called campaign ambition, and we sort of shoot these electronic press kits on different individuals and their ambition. How does that relate to directing? Well, you're directing a medium. It's new media. It's not a feature film. It's not a documentary. It's kind of like a mini documentary, I guess, if you want, but it is still directing nevertheless. So where you place the camera, how the camera moves, is still perspective. You're still telling a story. So whether it's in 30 seconds, whether it's a minute, whether it's 10 minutes, you're still telling a story. And the same rules apply, at least as far as I'm concerned. I would say that the same rules apply, so fragmented shots, for instance, in this piece here that I had shot with this young lady, she's into music. You can tell that, she's sitting back with her head back. She's actually talking about Kurt Cobain as being a big influence in her life. And we're talking about that. She's holding her eyes there because she was kind of getting teary-eyed about something that she was talking about within it. She's very earthly in some ways, and so I just try to capture just little moments, and like for instance, her in the top right, sorry, where she's walking with the guitar. I just had her walking towards me, and I captured that shot in a low angle, just to be able to show somewhat of an epicness to it. And that's actually one of my favorite photographs, believe it or not, because it wasn't extremely planned, but it was kind of captured. But I feel like it has a sense of tone to it, and it tells something about her and her music, the style of what she's wearing, etc. Commercials, directing in commercials. You're telling stories in 30-second bits. This is one that I'd done for 7-Up-10 under Pop 10 company when they used to be around, and we were doing stuff for various brands. I was shooting for 7-Up-10 and Humana and Contacts Daily and a number of others. And again, where do you place the camera? How do you place the camera? How much light is being put in here? Even though when I look back at this commercial, I felt, man, that's way too much light. But adding assets inside, where do you put the assets? And the assets could be things such as, the graphics that would land on it. And there's other people that have responsibilities within the craft of filmmaking that works with a director, and we'll speak a little bit about that, roles and responsibilities. But staging, how you stage it, you see the camera is, on her hands, it's showing her from her cleavage down, or from the mid up, or it's a wide shot. However it is, wherever you place that camera informs the story. And again, that's from another directing responsibility from the director. And let's go. Music videos. Done a ton of these, and continue to do some from time to time. This is a buddy of mine who actually happens to be a very good director himself. But he's also an artist, and we were shooting some music videos of his. And choice of lens. How do you shoot these things? Where do we place the camera? Uh, how do we tell the story? They're having a great time, and how do we show that someone's having a great time? How do we show that maybe these people are they have some sort of wealth to them? They're on speedboats, and they're in mansions with low angle shots. That's all to do with staging. Again, that is be a directorial choice in terms of what you're doing. What else do we have here? Let's see. Okay, documentaries. Again, so even if we're shooting just headshots of individuals telling a story, you're still directing. You're still helping the talent that's before you to be able to tell a story. And at the end of the day, that's basically what you're doing. Documentaries can go into a whole aspect of the process of that, but that would probably be for like course 102, I guess. All right. Cameras. What kind of cameras? This actually happens to be my camera here. This is a Red Dragon. That's my choice of camera. And, at this point, I think in this day and age, individuals are shooting on their phone cameras, and sometimes I do as well. I just shot a commercial for Citywide in New York, and we use both red cameras as well as iPhone 11, iPhone 12, the footage intercut with it, and all cuts in very seamlessly. Now, most of the time, a cinematographer or a director of photography will be dealing with that. But as a complete filmmaker for myself, I like to do a lot of my own camera work. I like to direct my own camera movements. And so as a director, you don't have to know all the inner workings of a camera, but it is helpful because when you need to communicate with the cinematographer who's responsible for the lighting and how something looks and feels from an aesthetic standpoint, to be able to execute his or her vision from the director, then you want to be able to have the right language to say, I need an 18 millimeter lens, which would be a wide, or I need an 85 millimeter lens, which would give me a close up. So you want to be able to have some level of language and understand what those tools are so that they can be able to execute your vision if you're not the one behind the camera yourself. Let's go through some of these roles and responsibilities. Obviously, you got writers, producers, editors, cinematographers, composers, and as a director, you are interacting with each of these. And in many times, as a director, you can be a writer director, you can be a producer director, you can be a director that produces, edits, does cinematography, and maybe even compose. If you think of someone like Spike Lee, or you think of Clint Eastwood, which is another one of my really favorite directors. A lot of those guys tend to do some of these things in addition to directing because they might just feel like it's easier for them to do, or they have a passion in that space. So again, for me, as a director, I kind of look at things as a complete medium, as someone that's authoring the story and is involved in all aspects of it. All right. Okay, actors, script supervisors, storyboard artists, production assistants, art directors. Again, from a director standpoint, and I can go into all of these, but just because this is a directing presentation, I would just say that as a director, you are interacting with all these departments again, right? What is the actor-director relationship like? What is the director and the script supervisor? Script supervisors and looking at continuity in a script to make sure that the director has all the scenes that he or she wants done, and that something wasn't missed, that there was some level of continuity. You know, if someone was smoking a cigarette halfway in a scene and then that cigarette was burnt out, and then you had to do a second take on it, but they didn't have that cigarette in their hands, well, that script supervisor would most likely catch that. You know, working with the actors, you know, what's that process like with a director? How much involvement does the director have? Because directors are not really acting teachers, but they need to coach that acting, that scene, or the actor to make sure that they're getting across what their vision is. Storyboard artists, you know, very essential tool, again, I think, to the director, because that helps to be able to have a visual look of what some of those scenes may look like. Production assistants, you know, well, that goes out saying, those are just people that are very critical to the production, because they can be able to help to make a lot of your work run and run a lot smoother. Not having enough production assistants, you know, then you as a filmmaker could be running around doing a lot of that as well. Art directors, and again, you know, if it's in the commercial world, you know, they are dealing with storyboards and different things. Sometimes in the film world, the art director is the person that's dealing more with the production of looking at, you know, what is the space that the director wants these things to be shot in. You know, do we put photos up? Do we put pictures? What are the aesthetic look? And so that art director would work very closely with the director, with the production designer, with uh, with the cinematographer sometimes, because you have to worry about lighting and what something would look like. So, and we'll touch on some of these again further down. Okay, let's see what we got here. Oh, you got art directors. Okay, casting directors, another essential department for a director. Like for instance, right now I'm working on a film called Seven Doors In, which is a adaptation from a book that's written by Beth Deacon. I'm actually happen to be doing this from her house right now, because we're actually here shooting some promos for her book. And, you know, right now one of the things we're doing is discussing casting, and, you know, having a good casting director that would narrow down a list of actors for a particular role, so that the director can then have a short list of people in which to be able to go into casting, opposed to seeing 200 people. They may only have to see 5 to 10 people and be able to have that narrowed down. A first assistant director, also a director in its own right, even though, believe it or not, a first assistant director deals a lot more with scheduling of scenes and working closely with the director and being able to direct the background actors. So you may see you see that as, in a sense, an assistant to that director. Second assistant is typically just another individual assisting the first assistant director. Second unit directors. Second unit directors happen to be individuals that will be directing a completely separate unit of from the first unit. So if you think of the main director as the first unit, the second unit director has his or her own crew of people, and they may be picking up things like an insert, you know, a hand entering a frame, you know, or they may be doing things that are stunts. Like for instance, Jeff Haberstad, which is a good friend of mine, who does like all the Spider-Man and, you know, every big Marvel movie you can think about. He's a second unit director, and sometimes ends up directing first unit, but most of the time he's dealing with all the stunts coordinations. You know, he's an expert in that, because you may go into a film as a first unit director, but you may not necessarily know how to blow a few cars up and throw people off of the rooftop of buildings. But a second unit director that might be all their specialty is, which is action sequences, flipping cars over, blowing things up. In fact, when I was coming up in my directing, I went away to action filmmaking camp, and we did, I think it was 3 days, 2.5 days of nothing but stunts. So how does an actor react to being shot by a shotgun? How does an actor fall off a building? How do you direct that? How do you flip a car over? Putting it up on the ramps and let it roll over and set it on fire. So we had 2 days of complete action filmmaking camp in, I think it was Bear Mountain in New York. At the time, I don't know if that camp still runs, but I would recommend that any director getting into this field to go take something similar to that, because it is quite interesting, and it's a lot of fun. To tell you the truth, it's a lot of fun. I just missed one right there. The visual effects department as well. That's also a specialized area that you can have visual effects supervisors that work very closely with the director, because again, he or she may not be someone that understands or knows how to deal with visual effects very well. But the visual effects supervisors work closely with the director to make sure that his or her vision comes across very clearly. And Roger, keep me on time, please, because I wouldn't want to go over my time, but I'll try to get through most of these.
Got it. You got 3 more minutes left.
Okay, so let me just start flipping through. Again, so as I said, the director is the author of the piece, right? He or she is responsible for the overall storytelling and their interaction with the executive producers, line producers, and these other individuals, coordinating producers, assistant producers. There's so many departments in which the director has to be involved in. All stages of those processes is important, because again, his or her vision is being executed. Same thing with the editor. When you finally get into the section where into the post-production of it, that director needs to now sit with the editor if they're not editing themselves, and make sure that the pacing of a scene is done correctly, that it is coming out in the way that they envisioned it. And editors and composers, same thing. What kind of music is being chosen? So a composer would be someone that would have the skill set in terms of saying, I would recommend this piece to give you the feel of melancholy or something that's subtle or haunted or what have you. But again, you're executing the director's vision through this side of skill set. And I'm going to skip through some of these because I know we spoke about some of these things like storyboards and so forth, which again, helps the director as a tool set. And I'm going to try to get through, I'm going to skip through some of these. Casting, we spoke a little bit about that, and the fact that that is about 80% of a director's job done. If you cast correctly, then you have the right talent in front of you working with you, and that can make a director's job very easy. The objectives. Let's just think of film in particularly, let's say feature film. What is it that you're trying to achieve? What message are you trying to tell within the storytelling of that particular film, right? And that is something that I think in terms of having vision and being able to have that early on is important. You want to be clear on your objective. The hardest way to make an easy living, that's something that Joe Rubin had told me. Joe Rubin is, he was the director of Sleeping with the Enemy and The Good Son and Money Train and a lot of great movies. And he always said, Terence, it's the hardest way to make an easy living. And he would know. What he means by that is, you can get paid really well and you can be at the top of your game, but the road to that is very difficult. And even when you're at the top, is still a lot of challenges, that those never seem to stop. And you never stop seeming to have to prove yourself to others, in this field. So you have to be prepared for that, and you have to be very thick-skinned about it. So you need to know you know, who are you? As I say in this case, understanding yourself as an individual will help you a lot as a director. So you want to be able to look inward and be able to understand that. How much is your time worth is another bit. As a filmmaker, as a director, that was the first thing that was told to me by my first directing teacher at NYU, Richard, this gentleman, Richard, I can't remember his last name right now, but he was my first directing teacher, and that's what he wrote on the board. He said, "How much is your time worth?" And he said, "You always remember that throughout your career from here on out." And that was an important lesson for me. And sometimes I question that many a times when I take certain gigs and I'm spending a tremendous amount of time, and sometimes I feel like it's not worth it, or other times you're like, you know, it is worth all the time that you put into it. So that is, as a filmmaker, you want to certainly look at the measure of that, because you can't get that time back. Why are you doing a project? Again, as a director, why do I want to tell this story? Why is this story important to me? You know, should I be doing this? Is the story right for me to be telling? You know, I've been offered projects where I started because I was like, well, I'm getting offered this project. And then once I get into it, I'm thinking, you know, I may not be the right filmmaker for this particular project. So understanding why you're doing something. And again, that goes back to know who you are. Part of the creative process, a director should have vision of what the media should be. The director is the storyteller. The director should put their personal essence into the film. So there you go. Again, you know, just to recap on some of the things that we had mentioned. Production stages. I think we sort of touched on that before, but you know, as a filmmaker, you are involved in all aspects of it, and pre-production is the most important, because that's going to determine how a lot of the other sections, such as the production, the actual execution of the film, will execute. Relationships. Couldn't stress enough that as a director, you're dealing with psychology, you're dealing with working with individuals, and how you manage the relationships in each of those departments, and with each actor and each producer and the composer and the editor and the script supervisor and every aspect of the production. You have different personalities, and your job's going to either be difficult or smooth sailing for the most part, based upon how you're able to manage those relationships. So it should not be overlooked as a filmmaker. Toolkits of a director: psychology and behavior. Like I just said, you know, you are almost like a therapist in some ways. You need to understand psychology, and you understand human behavior to be able to be successful, in my opinion, when it comes to this. Perspective and vision, which we also spoke about. Comfort zone. What is your comfort zone as a filmmaker or as a director, right? Is this outside of your comfort zone? Are you the kind of person that likes to stretch yourself, or are you the person that likes to play it safe and keep it safe? Being informed. That's another aspect. I tell people, you know, when people ask me about, you know, going into filmmaking and so forth, and, you know, I say, try to be informed. And what I mean by that is try to be knowledgeable on different things, not just within your field. Read a lot of materials, look at a lot of different films. You know, you should be watching a film every day, according to Spike Lee, at least. Studying, both good and bad. See what you should be doing or what you shouldn't be doing, because that is all information that is informing you, that when you're on set and you have to make decisions, and you have to be very present on your feet, because you got 60 people standing around waiting for you to be able to make an informed decision, then you yourself need to be informed. on what's around you. Some of the stuff here is more to do with writing and so forth, but story versus script, and just understanding that you're telling a story and with theme and subtext versus where the script is, of course, the written text, and that is sort of like your blueprint for what the director is going to go off of. Again, the controlling idea. What is sort of like your through line? What is, that's almost like part of the why in terms of why you're doing this, because this particular story is telling something that is of heavy relevance. If I had to think of what the controlling idea is on the project I'm working on now, some of it can be the fact that this teacher went into a maximum security prison unbiased, and that when she came out with an education for herself, not only for the individuals that she gave an education to, right? That could be somewhat of the controlling idea that kind of goes through almost like a through line of the storytelling. So you want to be able to understand that. Working with actors can be tricky because, you're dealing with, again, multiple personalities. Different actors like to be treated differently. Some of them don't like to rehearse. Some do like to rehearse. I've also learned that after going to NYU, I attended a lot of workshops like Judith Weston, who wrote the book, The Director's Intuition, which I highly recommend. Great book. She's a wonderful teacher. I try to stay in touch with her every so often. Mark Travis is another great directing coach. And, a lot of people rehearse with actors, but they rehearse in the wrong way, or they don't understand how to rehearse. So as a filmmaker, as a director, it is your responsibility to understand how to rehearse with an actor, so that when they get to set, you have a shortcut with them, that you are able to get the most out of that actor, opposed to them being burnt out on the scene by the time they get there. It no longer feels fresh to them. So that is something that is also taken for granted at times, but needs to be understood. Tone and mood. The project of tone of a project is dictated by the director, its atmosphere or mood of the scene. So again, you're controlling that tone and mood within the storytelling. Theme should be the subtext in your story. Story is what brings the audience, and theme is what makes it worthwhile. So subtext, and most people that know me know that I speak a lot about subtext, because that's what's not being said, but at the same time it's being said very loudly, just that's not spoken, or body language, or how we move towards something, that look, that glance, whatever it is that is subtext, that is not coming out in spoken word, that is informing the scene very much so than what is being said out of the actor's mouth. Let's take a quick look at the anatomy of the scene, something else that the director is responsible for, right? So to break down a scene, in every scene, for it to work, and you think of any movie that you have watched, just pull any scene out of it. And if it's a good scene, for the most part, you'll find that it has a goal, something that it was looking to achieve. It has an activity, something that is happening within the scene, the physicalness of what's going on. There is typically a complication or a conflict, some sort of adversity that's taking place in that scene. If you don't have that complication on some level, then you typically don't really have a good scene. So that's a good study. And the event, again, which is, what really happened? What was the event that took place in the scene? So a goal, activity, complication, event is typically a way to look at your scenes and say, do I have a scene that's working? The smallest unit in storytelling would be beats, right? You can have a beat in the scene, and what does that mean? Two characters may be speaking, and one of them can just take a pause, and that can be a beat in some respects. But the beats that we're talking about is not the pause inside, but just a small unit of behavior that is just very minute, where they took a beat and or termed as a beat. A number of beats put together, typically would make a scene, and a number of scenes put together would make a sequence. So now you have a sequence of scenes. You take a number of sequences, and those would equate to having an act. So we have a 3-act structure or a 4-act structure in a film, or if it's television, it might be broken up into 7 acts if there's commercials, etc. So as a director, you are looking at the beats in the scene, that make sure those beats are working, so that your scenes are working, so that your sequences would be correct, and that your sequences would then give you effective acts inside of the storytelling, that there's the correct timing for reversals and conflict, and then bringing it back and knowing when to relieve that tension into the next act. That's all stuff that a director would be responsible for. This is something from either Judith Weston's book, the script through line, understanding the super objective, what drives the character, what the character wants out of the situation, because there's always a want inside of a scene. So that also would be something. Okay, subtext and visual sets, we kind of spoke about that. Characterization. Question everything. And that would come out into this whole characterization. And I took this from Judith Weston's book, Directing the Film Director's Intuition, and I listed them down here. Every director wants to be asking this of their actors. What is his or her interests? What are they vulnerable to? How can she be hurt, or he? What's at stake? Who or what does the character trust? And you go through each of these, and this is a very good way to be able to understand your character and understand the needs, their fears. And so when it comes to directing that person, you now have somewhat of a blueprint of everything that affects them from a psychological standpoint, right? Now this would make you be able to have a great shortcut in understanding how to work with that actor and understanding the context of that character that actor is playing, right? If they say, well, in the character protecting himself, is the character protecting himself from pain in his past? Well, what does that look like in a scene? Or maybe their character is not. Maybe that is not something that the character, it's not a trait to that particular character. So you need to understand that. So question everything is extremely important. Feelings and emotions, of course, that will come from that previous slide in terms of being able to understand what the character is feeling and what kind of emotion, because filmmaking is very much of an emotional medium, and we should sort of think of it in that respect. Obstacles. If you don't have obstacles, you don't have a good scene, people. You always need obstacles and reversals inside. Character traits. Staging the scene. Staging the scene, and I'm just going to jump through some of these here just to try to get through some of the other things, because a lot of this here is to do more with some of the writing in terms of storytelling. But I'm going to get to staging, because staging is a very big element in terms of so let's skip through here to some of the staging here. It's a big element to for a director to do, right? Where do you place the camera? This is from my Youthful Ambition series.
Guys, we got 1 minute.
I got 1 minute. Okay. Yeah. So staging, again, where you place the camera, very important in terms of telling the story. Whether it be a close-up or whether it be a medium-wide shot, would inform how we react to the story. These are just some screenshots from one of my films that I did for Michelle. And, again, is it a fragmented shot, like how he's holding the gun, or is it a side profile shot, or a 3/4 front medium shot? So again, where the camera is placed and so forth becomes a very important aspect in terms of a director making decisions. And that's basically what a director does, is make decisions from beginning to end, creative decisions in terms of executing his or her vision. I think I'll wrap it here, guys.
Terence, that was amazing, man.
Thank you. Hopefully, I know that's kind of a very quick run through. It's like a sprint through a lot, but yes, nevertheless, if you had to sum it up, I think a director is just making a lot of decisions every step of the way, from the beginning through the end, of executing the vision that he or she has of a story, and keeping in mind that what their audience, what perspective they want to be able to give that audience. So.
And one thing I love about your presentation is that you have real, actual experience and footage. Plus, you mix computer science, tech, and into bringing into your whole directorial skill set. So everybody can bring their previous work experience into their directorial visions, which I thought that was amazing in terms of the look of your shot. You brought the photography skills in there. Your shots are beautiful, man.
Thank you. Yeah, for photography is definitely something I really enjoy. I like to just look at photographs, other people's work, other people's photographs, and I always feel like there's a narrative with it, and that informs a lot of what I do and how I do it. Tone and feel. It should always feel like a photograph. If I pause my movie at any point, it should feel like there was a great photograph taken there.
Terence, give everybody your information, man. So if they want to get in contact with you, because you drop a ton of amazing information, how can people reach you, get in contact with you, and see all your films?
Okay, so on Amazon Prime, For Michelle is up there. I think Prime of Your Life, I think, is on there. I didn't direct that one. I produced it. Hermaphrodita, which is a foreign film, I produced on that one. I think that is on Prime. I'm not sure where that is being distributed right now. The Versace film, obviously, is going to be coming out pretty soon, and we're not sure just yet, so you have to stay tuned for that one. The Marion Williams documentary, which I produced on with Tara, an AAWIC organization, that also is going to be coming out hopefully soon. And so I would say follow AAWIC and be able to get information, because Tara also produced on the Versace documentary with me, and that would be a good way to kind of keep up with what's going on in my space. But I would say terencegordon.com, you can get some of my material, and that's Terence with one R. So it's TERENCEGORDON.com. If they go to IMDb, you just put in my name. My credits should come up there as well. And if they want to DM me, just go to Instagram. That's the easiest way. TNGDIR. TNGDIR. That is my handle for Instagram. I'm on Facebook, but I don't tend to use it much. But Instagram would be the easiest way to reach me.
Nice, Terence. Thank you so much, man. This was amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, you just experienced the director extraordinaire, photographer extraordinaire, Mr. Terence Gordon. And please support all his films. Reach out to him and like, share all his amazing content. And this was amazing. Yeah, this was truly amazing. Our next African American Women in Education series is going to be taking place on June 25th at 7 p.m. You can get more information at www.africanamericanincinema.org for more information. Once again, we would like to thank our our supreme leader, Tara Renee, again for another successful event.
Yes.
Tara is coming live from Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the thick of things. And we will definitely get a report of how those things and events and amazing things that she's doing there as well. My name is Roger Moy for Front Media. This has been amazing. Thank you guys so much. Big shout out to Philly Girl Rocks. She said this was her first session on directing, and you got a master course on how to do some stuff. I was here taking notes, Terrence. This is amazing stuff. I gotta pick up.
It's a lot to cover in a short space of time, but yes, you know, please feel free to reach out to me, and thank you, Roger and Tara and AAWIC organization. You guys are doing some incredible things, and I'd encourage people to follow what you guys are doing and stay tuned to AAWIC for certain.
All right, guys, have a great evening.
You as well.